a waggle dance is how bees share information with one another to help each other survive. They go out, they figure out where the food, the water, the shelter is. They literally dance for their bee friends, and so the bees continue. But I thought that is a really interesting way to like put a filter on your own life, right? Because again, I haven't validated with many of my bee friends, but the educated guess is that bees aren't super worried about being perfect or everything going as planned. They are worried about helping one another based on the experiences that they have. And so I just took that relatively simple concept and started reflecting on the people in my life who just have the biggest place in my heart and the experiences I've had. And truthfully, the less perfect, the better the lesson.
Welcome to Her Unshakeable Confidence with dynamic mother-daughter duo Simone and Olivia Knego, where they discuss the secrets of transformation and how to build bold confidence and unwavering resilience. From intimate conversations with inspiring guests to sharing their personal journeys of triumph and challenge, Simone and Olivia create a supportive space where every woman is encouraged to rise above her fears and love the woman in the mirror. Tune into Her Unshakeable Confidence and join this special journey of connection and growth. It's like catching up with old friends who inspire you to be bravely and uniquely you.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of the Her Unshakeable Confidence podcast. I'm Simone Knego.
And I'm Olivia Knego. And today we have on special guest Courtney Youngs. Courtney Youngs found her forever person on the second try, despite her best life planning. In 2022, she became the mother to a beautiful baby boy who instantly brought purpose and love to her life. Like most new parents, Courtney found herself wanting to do right by her child, but struggled to embrace her less than perfect life that led to his arrival. Up until this point, her perfectionism had only led to fear. As a result, she wrote The Waggle Dance, a book that honors the people in her life and helps us all to embrace our unique life experiences and the lessons they yield. It's a relatively simple concept that requires introspection and a willingness to live the life God has created for you, not the one you had planned, to help yourself and others. In addition to being a newly published author, Courtney has spent the last decade as a corporate storyteller via her communications career at General Motors.
Welcome, Courtney.
Thanks. Weird experience to hear that read out loud, but
Right?
thank you.
Isn't it always like when
It
someone's
is.
telling you about you, right? I mean, it's always kind of funny, but
It is.
it's great. And we want to know more. So
Yeah.
tell us more about your story and what brought you to the point where you wrote a book.
Yeah. So really part of my story that involves the book, it all started about 5 years ago. And some of it is alluded to in the bio, but I was just in a really weird place in my life. I was navigating a young divorce, a major career change. I was falling in love with a man who is significantly older. And then my grandmother passed away, like all within a couple months of one another. And so as a perfectionist and a planner, nothing felt perfect or according to plan. And it sent me into this kind of deep, introspective, and necessary journey, to be honest. And at the same time, I was introduced to this concept of a waggle dance, which, if you don't know, a waggle dance is how bees share information with one another to help each other survive. They go out, they figure out where the food, the water, the shelter is. They literally dance for their bee friends, and so the bees continue. And I thought, well, not that I have talked to many bees in my day, but I thought that is a really interesting way to like put a filter on your own life, right? Because again, I haven't validated with many of my bee friends, but the educated guess is that bees aren't super worried about being perfect or everything going as planned. They are worried about helping one another based on the experiences that they have. And so I just took that relatively simple concept and started reflecting on the people in my life who just have the biggest place in my heart and the experiences I've had. And truthfully, the less perfect, the better the lesson. And I just started to write. And I feel like you can appreciate this as a mom. I had started and stopped several times over the past 5 years. And the day after my son was born, I was laying in the hospital holding him, and I can just so clearly recall looking at him and knowing that it all made sense right there. And that became my purpose, right? I wanted to share what I had learned or what people had poured into me to not only help him, but to kind of be a waggle dancing friend who might also need it and when they need it. And so that's a little bit more about me and how the book really came to fruition over the past year and a half.
I love it. I have actually heard the waggle dance thing before. Like I've heard that term,
Love
but I love that it is the way you've applied it to life, right? I
it. Yeah,
mean, I don't think we really think about that often that you need to do this waggle dance to invite people into your helpers, right?
right. Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't know. I'm thinking about how books come into fruition in general, right? Like you have this idea, you have this moment in time, and then you just go with it. I mean, that was kind of how I started my book was I I am not a writer. I used to say it like that, but I am a writer now. So,
Mhm.
and I would limit myself saying I'm not a writer. I can't write. I went to school for accounting. I have a master's in accounting. I'm a CPA by trade.
So
But
you're a unicorn, is what you're telling me
yeah,
right
yeah,
now.
no. I also have six children. I mean, I'm just kind of
Oh,
like
true.
I go whatever direction, like I'm just like, okay, here, let's do this. This sounds great. Let me try this. I
A
just love
superhero and a unicorn. Got it.
uh, I love trying new things. We'll say that. And but that was kind of, I felt like I had stories that I wanted to share and that if my
Yeah.
stories could help other people, it was really important to put them down on paper. And I loved the process. The one thing I didn't love, and I'll ask you your thoughts on this, is once you get it on paper and you get the book done, now it's like trying to get it out to the world.
Oh,
I feel like that is so much harder. And Olivia, you haven't read, you've read lots of books. You haven't
I've read
written a
a
book.
lot of books.
I know you're doing a lot of reading now in law school, but getting it out to the world is a hard thing. And I think a lot of people are like, "Oh, you wrote a book. That's amazing." Okay, next step, right?
yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah. I love that you are saying this for many reasons, not the least of which are it is very therapeutic for me in this moment. Yeah, it's difficult, right? And you and I had chatted about my limited field of knowledge when it came to writing a book prior to actually writing one. And that only continued into the entire process, right? It is like being an entrepreneur on so many levels. And so you go through this labor of love to write this book. You get it as perfect as it possibly can. And for me, it was like I had poured so, if not everything out. And then you got to kind of ramp up. It's a marathon and you got to think about getting it out into the world. And I'm a communications specialist by nature. And so I'm certainly educated and have experience, but it's a whole nother ball game when it's you and your own book. So yeah, it's hard. It's probably not even I can't even articulate how difficult it is. But for me, and I don't know if you felt the same way, I've tried to keep myself centered around the idea that I truly believe who is meant to read this book will find it or it will find them, and being at peace with whatever that is. Because it's so easy to get caught up in the numbers and the marketing and things like that.
Yeah. And I think at the beginning for me, I was really caught up in it. I was looking at stuff all the time. And now I just like, I get a report and I'm like, oh, that's cool. More people bought the book. Great. I'm not doing
I love
anything with
that.
it. And more people, great. Okay.
I love that.
So, um,
Yeah,
but it takes a while because at first you feel like you put so much, it's like anything you do in life, right? You put so much into something and then you're like, okay, where do I go with this next? So,
exactly. And you know, I guess I didn't, part of the whole evolution of this book is when I started writing it, I truly started writing when my son was a few weeks old, every time he napped. And I kind of went into it with like, this is probably going to be a Word document that I print for him and give to him someday as like a
Oh,
look what
that's
I
so
did for
sweet.
you. And so I just kept going, right? But since day one, and my husband and I, and he often has to remind me, it was meant for him. It was meant to be something that I could leave with him. When my grandmother had passed away, I found her journals, or they had been given to me, and I felt like I got to meet her again.
mm,
Um, and so I want that. I want that to be left with my son, because if I can't be here to tell him, I want them to at least come from my heart directly. So yeah, I've just kept that in mind, right? Like, so it is for him and it is for anybody else who needs it. And to your point, who it finds, that's who it's meant to find. And cool.
yeah, it's an interesting thing how it works, right? And but it does get a little frustrating at times where you feel like you put your heart out there. But really, I took the approach now of saying that that's really what I want is that the kids have it for later. Like they have, and it's Olivia and I talk about this all the time about perspective, especially with her dad with stories. So
Yeah.
he- he'll listen to our podcast and he'll be like, that's not the right story. That's not the right story. I'm like, yes, that is the right story. He's like, well, that's not how I remember it. And I said, well, then that's how you're remembering it, but our
Yeah.
perspective, because he'll be like, no, that is completely wrong. And we're like, perspective is perspective.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
and when I
Isn't
wrote,
that kind of a scary thought though? And I acknowledge it like right at the front in my book. Like, hey, these stories are mine and only
Mhm.
as accurate as my memory allows. But for me, it's kind of this like a little bit of a terrifying realization that like you have all these experiences and stories with people, but your version could be very different than mine, and neither is wrong. It just is a different way perspective to think about it for sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, we had to get that across to him that it's our perspective of this story and he can
No,
have
he
his
just
own.
misremembers. Like, I believe there are different perspectives, but like, sorry, Dad, sometimes you just get the facts wrong.
Oh, he's gonna listen to this and he's gonna be like, "Oh, you picked on me again."
Well, he hasn't called me in a couple of days, so
Oh, okay.
this
So
is a
you're
sign to call me.
revenge.
Yeah,
This is the subtle poke. And for what it's
yeah.
worth, I'm on your side. You got my
Thank
vote.
you. I appreciate that. But I think about that idea of perspective a lot, especially with when you think about like how little or how small of something you can do that can have such a big impact on someone and like a conversation that you might remember for the rest of your life, whether that's good or bad, that person might not even remember happening, which I think
Totally
is
true.
so insane.
Yes. And I love that you said that because my brother just finished the book and he called me and he's like, I would have never guessed. I remember so many of those stories. Luckily, he didn't dispute the way that I remember them, but he said, I had no idea that that moment had such an impact on your
Mhm.
life. And it's true. Like I wrote about the one day my high school teacher yelled at me for something and I deserved it. But the words of wisdom he shared was, time and words are two things you can't take back. So choose wisely. And I have no doubt that he has said it 100 times, probably hasn't remembered it,
Hmm.
certainly saying it to me that day, but it's stuck with me for years. Which I think also puts a little bit of ownership on all of us, right? That the words we say to other people, to ourselves, they matter and they can stick for a long time. And so I think that's really empowering and it's a sobering reminder for how we show up in the world.
Absolutely. We talk about that a lot too, about how your words matter and
Yeah.
how they can really impact other people. And obviously in my whole confidence practice, it's huge, right? The way we
Mm-hmm.
talk to ourselves, the way we talk about ourselves to other people, that totally affects our self-esteem. It totally kills our self-confidence if we're not treating ourselves with respect. And
Absolutely.
so it's such a big part of it, but that's what we love talking about.
Absolutely. No, I love it. You're right.
So another thing, obviously, that we both love is storytelling. And so why do you think storytelling is so important? And obviously storytelling is part of, that's
Hmm.
who you are. So
Yeah. Again, if I can tie it all back to kind of where I've been in my mindset, struggling with perfectionism, I think it's something a lot of us can relate to. It goes right at our confidence most of the time. If I'm being honest with myself, I think part of perfectionism is caused by selfishness, right? We've got some selfish motives in there. And so the way that I started to think, well, how do you fix that? Right. And I thought, well, in service, serving other people, helping other people like a bee in a waggle dance. And okay, Courtney, well, then how do you help other people? What does that look like to you? And for me, it's storytelling. Why? Because I think our stories are real and they are meant to help other people. And I think that, people often, especially in my line of work, don't immediately acknowledge that they have a story or they don't see it.
mm,
And so I talk a lot about that, how to kind of figure out what your story is so that you can have confidence to share it. But to me, storytelling is, at the risk of sounding cliche, everything. It's a
mm,
connective tissue in the world. If you think about the strongest relationships you have or those immediate connections that you form with people you just meet, if you think about why that happened, I'd be willing to bet it's because someone offered stories, usually personal ones in nature, right?
yeah, and I think so often people are afraid to share their personal stories. And you're right,
Yep.
they think that they don't have a story. I mean, I've had this conversation with many people especially women, where they're like, "Oh, you
Mhm.
have the most amazing stories. I don't have a story." I'm like, "You
Yeah, you
absolutely
do.
do. Start talking, start talking." And as soon as they start talking, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, that's
Right?
unbelievable. Wait,
Yeah.
let's keep going." And then so everybody has a story, but you just have to sometimes dig deeper and also realize that everything you do in your life can positively or negatively impact other people. And by thinking about what you're doing and by sharing the things that you go through, you can definitely help other people.
Absolutely. And I am a simple and acronym girl by nature, right? So I've thought about it and I'm like, just think about it like this: story. S, significant moments in your life. What have you been through? T, think about the people and experiences in them. O, you got to own the imperfections, your authenticity. R, reflect on what you've learned. And then to your point, Y is say yes, share
Mhm.
the story. And I promise you, if you think about your experiences in your life through that simple lens, you can find a story pretty quickly. And I bet you somebody could connect with it.
Liv, do you feel like people your age think about that at all?
Great
Stories?
question.
Yeah, like, we as we get older, like we really focus on stories because you realize it is such an amazing way to connect with other people. Do you think about that at your age, or you're just like getting through the day?
I have two parts to that answer. And I think the first part is that in terms of ways to connect with people, I wouldn't ever describe it as my story. I would say that it's individual stories that I like to tell, that I like reflect about the people in my life or the people, like the person I am or the experiences I went through, but I wouldn't define them as, or like, I wouldn't say like that's my story. I would say
Hmm.
that's just like, I don't know, an example of how that my personality is the way it is. And then there's corporate storytelling, which is, I think, what most of my friends think about when you talk about creating your story. And that's really like your resume pitch, what you're going to tell employers, how your background information plus your relevant work experience forms the person you are in your job and why that job should hire you.
Hmm. It will be interesting to see as you get older how that changes. Because
Hmm.
I really haven't thought about it like that. I mean, I do tell other people's stories, but I definitely don't think about the corporate storytelling part, obviously, because I'm not in corporate, but still.
But yeah, like right now, when I think about why people ask me like what specific branch of law and like why that branch, I have to think about why, I mean, like, why does my background lend itself, A, to law in the first place, and B, like, why entertainment law? And it's like part of that is me being on a podcast. Part of that is me working the past jobs I've had.
Yeah.
That is so true. I've never thought about it that way, but very good point.
And authentic storytelling, which again, you hear people tell a lot of boastful stories, right? And you're like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, whatever. But when people are really, I mean, for me, what makes the biggest impact is when people are real and raw, when they
Hmm.
really sit there and kind of bare their heart. And what we do on this show now is we just say it all. Like we don't,
Yeah.
if something happens, we talk about it because again, if it can help one other person, then it's worth
Yeah.
talking about it because I think there's when you go through something, there's whether you feel vulnerable or there's shame involved or whatever, it's really
Mhm.
understanding how important it is just to get the story out in the world and not worry about what anybody else is thinking and if they're going to judge you or not. And to me, none of that stuff matters anymore. It did. It did for years. I mean, I worried about what everybody else thought for years. I mean, that was something how I was raised. I mean,
Right.
my mother, who I absolutely adore, but her generation, when I would do anything, she would always say, "Well, what will other people think?" I don't really care. I'm not thinking about what they're thinking. So, but
Yeah.
now I don't think about that at all.
Which talk about a power move, right? Because I mean, there are so many instances in my life. Going through a divorce is not the least of which, that I can think about the pressure and just this paralyzation that I felt, thinking about what other people would think. And so for a really long time for me, because I'm an open book usually, I was locked tight on my story and sharing those details for fear of judgment. And through a series of experiences, and ironically, I had been telling people the same things you just said, right? Like, you got to be authentic, you got to open up, you got to tell your story. But when it came to my own life, I thought, no, ma'am.
Mm.
Until little by little, I worked up the confidence to start doing it. And as I did it, it was amazing. That moment where you look across the table or on the other end of the phone and someone says, you know what, I've been there too.
Mm.
Or when you're on the other side of it, and then you can be the one that looks over or reaches out your hand and says, like, hey, this is going to be okay, and let me tell you why, kind of a thing. But you can't get to that connection point unless to steal your words, you're willing to kind of bare your soul in it. So
Do you have a favorite story that you like to share?
a favorite story that I like to share, I have so many stories. Depends on the topic, it really does. I think about, and I know, in the light of confidence, I can remember when I started my career over a decade ago, and I was a little fish in a big pond. And I can remember walking through the doors of General Motors thinking, oh my gosh, I hope nobody catches on to the fact that I'm like not supposed to be here, because I am way out of my league. Right. And talk about lack of confidence for a very long time that was riddled through me. And I was experiencing a lot, and I had formed so many good mentorships and connections. And one of which is a leader by the name of Mike. And I sat with Mike one day, and I was actually kind of complaining about just some roughness in the corporate world. And he very calmly looks over and he goes, you know what, Courtney, you can learn something from everyone you meet, good, bad, or indifferent. And I thought, to the point of, he probably doesn't even remember that he said that, but I thought, wow, that is so smart. You're so right. And it was like somebody flipped a switch. And I just started approaching my corporate career that way, right? That I was there to learn, and good, bad, and indifferent, failures, wins, everything in between. And so I always kind of think back to that story and moment, because it was such a transformative, maybe seemingly obvious moment that just really kind of changed the trajectory for my career. So
And it's
I
interesting.
like to share that forward with
Yeah.
my incoming young corporate communicators.
Yeah, I always like to say that this very similar. You learn something from everyone you meet. That's why I like to talk to people, because
Yeah.
it's always interesting. Now, sometimes it's what not to do, and sometimes I do things and I tell the kids like, okay, this is what not to do. Like that was a big mess up. This is what
Let
not to
me
do.
save you a few
Yeah,
heartaches.
yeah,
Don't do
yeah.
that.
But I always feel like those pieces to our stories, how and thinking back to what you guys said before, both you and Olivia, about how that person may not even remember telling you that and what an impact it had on your life, and why that's so important that we share those kinds of things, because it does make such an impact moving forward.
Totally.
So, talking about confidence, what does it mean to you?
Hmm.
We all have our different ideas of confidence, and I think I was saying the other day that I don't, it's not the loudest person in the room. I mean, sometimes you can be the loudest person in the room and still be confident, but that's not what makes you confident.
No.
Not the person that jumps in front of other people and,
I don't know if there's a specific trait that you could like solely identify as like that's the sign of a confident
mm,
person. I think it comes in so many
Hmm.
different shapes, forms, and sizes.
Hmm. Yes. And thinking about that, why I like this question so much is because it inherently acknowledges how subjective it is,
mm,
right? Because confidence to me looks very different than probably the two of you, and certainly not just within, but how we see it in other people. So selfishly, I think for me, the trait, or how I would describe confidence, is peace. I feel most confident when I'm at peace with who I
mm.
am, or what I've done, or what I'm doing. And I find that when I can hit that sweet spot, I'm not second guessing myself, and I'm feeling really good about the way that I'm showing up in the world. My dad, when I was in college, and luckily for me, he put it in writing, so he can't refute it. But he wrote me a little note on a piece of paper, and he said, as long as you can look in the mirror and you're happy with what you see, we're all good. And I framed it, and it's still by my mirror today,
That's so
because I
sweet.
thought that to me is the mark of peace and confidence.
I love that. And it's interesting that you say it, because I talk about in my whole thing with, I do something called the real method, which is respect your reflection, embrace your failures, ask yourself what
Mm.
you want, and love the woman in the mirror.
Oh,
And
I love that. Love the
thank you.
acronyms.
Yeah, I know. Love acronyms. But really learning to love the woman in the mirror and accepting all of it. Your
Yep.
flaws are not your flaws. They're just part of who you are, right? I mean, people are
Right.
so focused on being perfect, and we're going to talk about that now because I don't believe in perfection. I feel like everything is always a work in progress, and I don't even know why we have the word perfect because there's nothing that's perfect, right? I mean, maybe
Mhm.
when a baby is first born, they are perfect, right? I mean,
Mhm.
that's perfection.
Hmm.
And then you move on from there.
Yep. It's all downhill from there.
Yeah, it's all that woo, it's a lot of work, let me tell you. Um, but yeah, so you say that you're a recovering perfectionist, right? Is that how you said it? I mean, or
It
you
is how
are,
I said it.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I say that active, like
Hmm.
that's present tense
Hmm.
for me, right? Like it is a constant check of
Hmm.
myself.
Yeah.
What does that look like? Because I think that I'm probably not far from a perfectionist, but just like not at all. I think I have, I don't know, weird work standards in the way of like I know like my abilities. So, and I know that like I can succeed without having to be perfect.
Mhm.
So I'm just curious, like what does that urge look like to you?
First of all, I'm going to write that down because that's a good frame of mind to know that you can succeed without being perfect. So thank you for sharing that. I think for me, it has changed throughout the chapters of my life. Early in my career, right, perfectionism to me was not making a mistake, being 10 steps ahead of whatever ask came my way, being looked at the overachieving, high performing corporate career woman that I aspired to be. But I would say since becoming a mom, going on 2 years, so far from a veteran or experience like you, but I think it's coming to terms with, or where I feel the perfectionism struggle the most is I am someone who is quite frankly used to operating at about 110% at whatever I choose to do. So
Okay.
if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it really, really well. And I'm not going to be able to see anything that I've left on the table, for lack of a better term. Now, being a mom, being still a corporate career person, writing and publishing a book and marketing it on the back end, it is this acknowledgement that, sometimes it's 80% of what I would deem as my previous standard. Sometimes it's less than, some days on a good day, it's more, but very rarely. And so I can't often identify moments where I'm like, wow, I did that. There is nothing else I could have done to be better or make that better in the moment.
Mm.
And so it's constantly kind of fighting that narrative and, to steal your words again, loving the woman in the mirror, whatever percentage shows up that day.
Yeah, I haven't thought about it like that. And that's a really interesting way of thinking about it that when I go through my day, I just kind of get through my day now. Like I know the things I need to get done. And I always say that the things I don't get done, that's what tomorrow is for. But
Mm,
I really haven't thought about it like, did I give 110% today? It's kind of like I gave everything I had to give at this moment because that's all the time I had, or that's all
mhm.
the energy I had. Um, but I think I'm going to think about it a little bit differently moving forward and just kind of, I don't know, evaluate it more. Like, did I do all the things I could have done with this? My problem is I get very scattered. So I'm like got 10 projects going at once
Yep.
and I literally have to say to myself, okay, wait, finish the laundry, get that done, and then go finish everything else because you're trying to like fold a shirt, cook something, get on my podcast, write something in
Yes.
my chapter. And I'm like, do one thing, finish it, then walk away. So that's like my new thing is to really not try to do
Yes.
everything literally in the moment because that's what I like to do.
It's hard. I think as women, we're inherently multitaskers because we're good
Hmm.
at it, right?
Yeah.
But it's interesting. By my desk, I have a little note card, and I write down things that don't make me feel good at the
Mm-hmm.
end of the day. And the first one on it is multitasking
Mm-hmm.
because it inevitably means that I'm not, whatever I'm doing or the 30 things I'm trying to do at once, I can't do them all,
Hmm.
at 100% or not even 100%, but the level that they deserve the attention, if not just to complete folding the shirt.
Right.
Um, and so I'm with you. I'm really trying to be, when I'm doing this is what I'm doing. I'm really trying to throw up those boundaries a little harder on myself, and it's on me.
My husband likes to say, because I'll be like, oh my gosh, can't you multitask? And he's like, multitask means you're doing a crappy job at everything. So no, I can't. And I was like, oh, that's pretty funny, actually. I haven't thought about it like that before. But
That is so true. My
yeah.
husband often says, he's like, let me explain it to you this way. Women's, like, your brain is kind of like a bowl of spaghetti, right? Like, you got all these things you're trying to do at once and think through at once.
Hmm.
He's like, I'm more of like a waffle guy. I've got compartments. I'm in one section at a time. And I'm like,
Yeah.
that must be nice.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
would like a waffle. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Interesting. That's really funny. Yeah. But he said that I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense, right? I
it
mean,
does.
now he might have just been saying that because he can't multitask, or, maybe the point is valid.
I can't confirm or deny. I see it on both sides.
Yeah. But I don't think, like, looking back at my life, I don't think I've ever been a perfectionist. I don't think I have been. I think I've been someone who, because I struggled so much with self-doubt, I used to compare myself to everyone all the time and just never felt like I was enough. But I don't think I ever strived for perfection because I don't think I would ever have thought like I could have gotten there. So it was never even part of my mindset, good or bad, right? I mean, in
Right.
the long run, probably good because I don't really think about my life that way at all. I just think about doing the best I can do in the moment, doing the best I can do with my kids. I mean, that was the big learning curve, really, from day one, thinking that I had it all together and then like child one. So, I mean, with six of them, it really changed drastically over the years. Child one, I had to sterilize everything. Everything had to be perfect.
Yeah.
By kindergarten, the kid could do long division, and then child number six, I'm like, was that in the trash can? It's probably still good. You're fine. Don't worry.
Five
Don't
second
worry.
rule.
Yeah. Oh,
Well,
30
I'm
second
expecting
roll. It doesn't
number
matter.
two. So I'm hopeful that that will also, I'll follow that
Oh,
trajectory and lighten up a little
yay.
bit.
That's exciting.
Yes.
Congratulations. That's so
Thank
fun.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
I mean,
you.
fun for you, not for me anymore. Like minivan is full, full.
I don't know if I would describe it as fun, but it is a blessing.
It is a blessing. It is. I have six of the most amazing blessings. They have been so fun and just I loved every minute of it, even the really tough times, because it just helps you grow as a person and
Yes.
learning a level of patience that I never thought I was capable of. All of those kinds of things that just makes you a better person. Just makes you a better. Not saying if you don't have people who are listening, if you don't have kids, it doesn't mean you're not a good person. Come on.
Hmm.
What I'm saying is that for me, it really changed how I looked at things, right?
Mhm.
I thought I was patient and I know I wasn't. And I realized that how much better I could do by these little humans teaching me these things.
Completely. The same guy who talked to me about learning something from everyone you meet before we welcomed my son into the world. He's like, Courtney, people tell you kids change everything, and they do. But let me tell you, for me, it was for the better. And
Hmm.
I feel that way in my life. Like, just even over the past 2 years, the perspective that my son has brought is wonderful. So
Yeah.
we're
And
ready for
then,
a sister.
yeah. Oh, that's so exciting. And then they grow up and then I mean, it's obviously completely different, but it's fun. It's like you can now be friends. Like I still
Right.
parent sometimes, but
Host a podcast together. This is so
Ray,
cool. I love
yeah,
it.
yeah. And it's so fun having adult children where you're like, do you want to go to this restaurant? Do you want to go here? You want to do this? You want to
Yeah.
go shopping? And not having to say like, it's bedtime. Put your stuff away. Brush your teeth. Although maybe I'll say that
Yes.
stuff forever. I don't know, but it's
I don't know the last time I've been yelled at. It's been a while.
I don't
But
know.
I've been doing extra well recently. So like
That's a
it-
mark of accomplishment in and of
yeah,
itself.
I've been doing extra well, so my
I
mom didn't
have
yell at
been.
me. Well,
I don't know. Your
I'm like
in-laws
so
stole
independent.
I'm not a yeller. What
No,
did you
I
always
can't the
say?
last time that, yeah, I can't remember the last time you've been disappointed in me. Is that the
There we
better
go.
Oh,
answer
that's
there?
worse.
Yeah.
That's worse
Yes.
than getting
Yeah.
yelled at.
They would always say that the worst thing I could say was that I was disappointed.
Ugh,
And they were
ugh.
like, "Oh, that was like a dagger to the heart if I said I was disappointed." Because I wasn't a yeller. I mean, trust me, there's sometimes where I would get angry, but it
But that
Sure.
takes a
was
lot.
still like, because you never yelled, it was still like very impactful because it meant you like, oh my gosh, she was serious. But when you said you were disappointed, when you yelled, it's things that you could like easily forgive and they were just like mistakes. When you were disappointed, it was like, oh
Oh,
wow, I really messed up.
I'm glad it
well, I
had
think
such a
you're
big
doing
impact.
okay, Olivia. You're in
Thank
law
you.
school, hosting a podcast with mom, and
I
seem
honestly
like
think
you.
I'm doing very okay as well. Like I'm
I
on
think
top of
you're
my
doing pretty
stuff.
good. I'd be willing to bet that mom and dad are pretty proud.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so you talked about your grandmother earlier,
Mhm.
and did she have a big impact on your life? Was she
Yeah, and I'll do my best not to let my emotions get the best of me. But my grandmother was everything to me.
mm,
She was my best friend, my first phone call. She's been gone for 5 years, and I still catch myself trying to call her. Um, we spent almost every day together growing up. You know, when I was in college or working internships, every chance I would get, I'd go home and just sit and have lunch with her. So huge impact, and it's still there. It didn't leave with her. She still continues to kind of shape and mold who I think I want to become. So
I love that. What's the best advice that she ever gave you?
hmm. I think it is a common phrase, but for me, it will always be her phrase. And
Mm,
she taught me that this too shall pass. And I have no doubt, I don't remember the, first time she said it, but I have no doubt it was probably as I called her through my own tears about whatever difficulty I was going through. And her simple and loving response was, Courtney, this too shall pass. But as I've gotten older, I realized that she was teaching me a little bit more than just, hard times pass. She also taught me that the good ones go just the
mm.
same.
Mm.
And so I have been intentionally present every opportunity I can with her kind of saying that in my ear because, good, bad, or indifferent, the moments aren't forever. And so that's the thing that I hold on to the most from her for sure.
It's so true when you think about the good and the bad, right? I mean, the bad moments are the ones that we want to pass quickly.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't really think about when we're having a really good moment or a good whatever is going on in our lives that, yeah, that is going to pass too. And
Mm-hmm.
really embracing that moment and really enjoying every second. And I always say, like, even when it's miserable, like, you have to embrace that as well because that's how you
Totally.
grow, that's how you learn. And it's painful in the moment. And I mean, even with Olivia, she's gone through a lot in her 21 years that, I mean, starting with getting diagnosed with Crohn's and not starting with, but, she was diagnosed with Crohn's at 16 and that was a lot,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it was kind of embracing that moment and just moving forward.
I think my husband and I, when we first started dating, I had shared many stories of my grandma, but the this too shall pass was one of them. And from that moment on, we said, look, we're never going to use the phrase, I can't wait. We will
Mm,
never use it in this house. And we don't. You will, and we've completely stripped it from our language. And now it sticks out like a sore thumb because I mean, we can wait, right? And unfortunately, life is only heading in one direction. So the last thing that either of us want to do is rush it, right? I
mm.
don't even the hard moments because there's goodness in those too. So yeah, we've tried to really kind of pump the brakes on how fast we're trying to live our lives
And that's hard to do sometimes, right? I mean,
all the time.
Yeah.
you're always waiting for that next moment. I mean, Olivia's waiting for law school to be done, she just started.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
like it so far, but yeah, it is just looking ahead to what's next.
I
I
think it's
think
hard to be in that mindset, right? Because it's natural. We all do it, whether it's getting through a work day or getting through law school or getting through whatever it is. You're like, what's next? But then all of a sudden you're in the next and you're not getting that one back.
mm,
Um, And so I think that that's just like a sobering reminder, even in, the newborn and toddler years that I found myself in. There are many of times where I would love a little more sleep or a little less need, but you can attest to this with grown children,
Yeah.
right?
You don't get those
It's
times
a
back and
Hmm.
you miss them. I mean, the snuggly times, the hugs all the time, and then they grow. I mean, Olivia still likes hugs, but a lot of
good.
them, they grow
Hugs are
up and
great.
they're like, we're good. We're good. Yeah. Hey, bye, mom. Bye. Don't
Yeah,
let
I'm
the
not
door
ready
hit
for
you.
that.
Yeah. And so, yeah, it's really appreciating even those struggles and the sleepless nights and
Mhm.
all the things, the food on your shirt, whatever happens, right? Like it's just
Yeah.
part of it. It's
You can't
just,
see it, can you?
no, you can't see it. You can't see it. But just as an example, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I think about that all the time, how so many people, and probably me for a while, were like, let me just get through this. Let me just get
Yeah,
through this, instead of saying, okay, what am I enjoying in this moment? What am I
we're
learning from this
learning.
moment?
Mhm.
Right. But it's just getting from point A to point B.
Totally.
And then you get to point B and you're like, oh my gosh, I've missed out on so much stuff. There's so many things and I never want to say, I wish I would have, I wish I could have. I
Mhm.
just now say that all these things I've done in my life have brought me to this moment in time. And what can I do from here?
Yeah, exactly. I even think about such a task person, right? And sometimes like my son or my husband will hug me and I'm like, but I got to go do this. And then
Mm,
not to be dramatic, but like, what if that's the last time I got to feel their hug? Like, why would I rush that? So it's again, not to be cliche or dramatic, but it's real.
yeah.
None of us have a promise or a guarantee the last time I checked. So
Yeah, it's
um,
true. And I do that. I do that regularly as well. My husband's like, come here and snuggle. And I'm like, I'm good. And he's gonna love this
do you
episode.
want
Yeah.
dinner?
And I'm like, I'm in the middle of this. I'm literally
Yeah.
recording this or I'm doing this. And he's like, okay, okay. And
Mhm.
but it is a good reminder that you just don't know, right? I
Hmm.
No.
mean, and you see it happen all the time and I don't even want to go that direction, but yeah, it's just enjoying every moment, enjoying the moments,
Hmm.
enjoying even the crappy stuff that you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I got through that. But you got through it, right?
Yeah.
So and and then by sharing your story with someone, you can help them get through something as well. So
That's the waggle theory.
I
Yes.
love the waggle. I love the waggle, and I'm sorry I haven't read the book yet. I can't wait to read the book now.
Well, thank you.
I'm really excited about that. So, Liv, did you get your calendar?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, okay, let's talk calendar for a second.
Okay.
I'm excited for this.
Yeah. You are always winning, even when you are apparently losing. It's a win for the cycle of BS. You don't have to overcome life or the immediacy of your concerns. You have to overcome yourself and not your best self, but rather your worst, most negative, most cynical self.
I think I might need
Wow.
you to read it one more time because I
Yeah.
think that it's pretty relevant to what we just talked about.
I know. They've
So
been
read it
pretty
again
good
for
this
me.
week.
I know, right?
Weirdly on brand. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
You
It
are
works.
always
It really works.
winning.
Okay, you are always willing.
Sorry.
Okay.
You are always winning. Even when you are apparently losing, it's a win for the cycle of BS. You don't just have to overcome life or the immediacy of your concerns. You have to overcome yourself and not your best self, but rather your worst, most negative, most cynical self.
Yeah. So that whole thing
Wow.
about enjoying the moments and not trying to rush everything ahead. And we think so much about everything has to be a certain way, but kind of enjoying where you are right now and appreciating where you are right now, even when it's a struggle.
Yeah. I mean, what I heard was overcoming your self-criticism.
Hmm.
And interesting coming into this call, I was to be honest, struggling with that, right? I had a day and
Yeah.
my internal dialogue was not great. But what I'm going to take away from the calendar and the call is that it's not the day I need to overcome. It's what I'm saying to myself. So thanks for sharing that.
You need your positive affirmations, your positive
I know.
self-talk. I
I'm
was
going to
work.
call you guys more often.
Yeah, yeah. I was working today on part of my speech where I'm creating a short, well, I'm not doing it. I'm having someone create a short video for me of athletes and celebrities, watching them actually use their positive self-talk, because
Mm,
I think so many people will say, "Oh, I'm not going to do that. That doesn't really
Hmm.
work." It works.
it
I mean, there's
works.
science behind it. There is
It
so
works.
much research and data behind it. And then when you watch people at the top of their game, their peak performance, right? And they're
Mhm.
using this, I think it's so important that every person needs to do it. When we look in the mirror, we need to, you know, use our positive affirmations to remind ourselves what we're capable of, how beautiful we are, how amazing we are. And it's not being conceited, it's really just giving us a boost. Every person out there has this and should be doing this. So
Love that.
that's my
I'll
soapbox.
be looking forward to that video. That's a good
That's
one.
my soapbox for the day. So, where can people find you?
So I am most active on Instagram at the Waggle Dance. And between there and LinkedIn is a good bet.
Perfect. And where can they find your book?
Book is available everywhere that books are sold. So Barnes and Noble, Amazon, and Target, namely.
Yeah, like I said, I can't wait to read it and
Thank
talk
you.
about the Waggle Dance some more. And I look forward to seeing you at a future event. So
Yes.
very
Yes.
exciting. And anything else? Any last bit of wisdom you want to leave the listeners with?
I
You've left
just
a lot. You've left a lot. Yeah.
well, in the true Waggle nature, it was things that people had shared with me. I just get to
Mm.
pass it forward. But I think for me, it's a constant question of what do I want to choose for myself? Do I want to chase perfectionism and to your point, it's not really a real thing, or do I want to chase and lean into purpose? And so I think that's a really healthy question to continue to ask ourselves as we're evaluating how we're showing up, how we're talking about ourselves, what we're taking on, knowing that we can take on anything. And so for me, I'm going to do my best to choose purpose every day. So I hope that kind of sheds some light on who I am and what I think other people are capable of as well.
It's amazing. It's a great
Thank
way
you.
to leave it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us on this week's episode of Her Unshakable Confidence, and we will see you next time.
Bye,
Thank you so
guys.
much for having me.